Now we move from knowledge to emotion. Revenge is a kind of wild justice. Wild equals primitive. Justice equals legal system. Meaning, revenge is natural but uncivilized. In this slide, we examine the central theme of Bacon's essay, of revenge. This essay deals with human emotion, moral judgment, and social order. Bacon analyzes revenge not only as a natural instinct but also as a moral and social issue. First, the essay discusses the nature of revenge. Bacon begins by stating that revenge is a kind of wild justice. By this, he means that revenge is a natural human reaction when someone is wronged. It arises from anger and the desire to retaliate. However, it is wild because it is uncontrolled and outside the boundaries of law and reason. It belongs to primitive instinct rather than civilized behavior. Second, Bacon examines the psychological impact of revenge. He explains that a person who constantly thinks about revenge keeps his wounds fresh. Instead of healing emotionally, he continues to suffer. The desire for revenge disturbs peace of mind and traps a person in bitterness. Thus, revenge harms not only the offender but also the person who seeks it. Third, the essay explores the moral and social consequences of revenge. In a civilized society, law exists to punish wrongdoing. When individuals take revenge into their own hands, they challenge legal authority and create disorder. Revenge can lead to a cycle of retaliation, disturbing social harmony and stability. Finally, Bacon emphasizes the superiority of forgiveness. He argues that in taking revenge, a man is only equal to his enemy, but in forgiving, he becomes superior. Forgiveness shows strength, self-control, and moral greatness. It reflects wisdom and nobility of character. Thus, the core theme of revenge is the analysis of revenge as a natural but destructive impulse, and the assertion that forgiveness is morally higher and socially beneficial. Revenge is a kind of wild justice. This powerful opening line sets the tone of the entire essay. In a few words, Bacon presents his central argument about revenge. When he calls revenge wild justice, he means that revenge appears to be a form of justice because it seeks to punish wrongdoing. However, it is wild because it is uncontrolled, emotional, and outside the boundaries of law and reason. Revenge is natural but uncivilized. It arises from human instinct when a person feels hurt or insulted. It is an immediate emotional response. Yet, in a civilized society, justice should be administered through law, not through personal retaliation. Revenge bypasses legal systems. Instead of allowing courts or authorities to handle wrongdoing, a person who seeks revenge takes the matter into his own hands. This weakens the authority of law and creates disorder. It belongs to primitive instinct. Revenge is rooted in anger and passion rather than rational thinking. Bacon suggests that while the desire for revenge may be natural, true wisdom lies in controlling this instinct and choosing forgiveness instead. Through this opening line, Bacon clearly establishes that revenge may resemble justice, but it lacks the discipline and morality of lawful judgment. In this slide, we examine how Bacon logically builds his argument in the essay. His reasoning progresses step by step, moving from human instinct to moral judgment. First, Bacon admits that revenge is natural. When a person is wronged, the instinct to retaliate arises immediately. This reaction is part of human nature. Bacon does not deny this impulse. Instead, he acknowledges that the desire for revenge is common and understandable. However, he argues that revenge keeps wounds fresh. A person who constantly thinks about taking revenge continues to relive the injury. Instead of allowing emotional healing, revenge sustains anger and bitterness. Thus, it harms the one who seeks it as much as, or even more than, the offender. Next, Bacon establishes that forgiveness is superior. He states that in taking revenge, a man is only equal to his enemy, but in forgiving, he becomes superior. Forgiveness reflects strength, self-control, and moral elevation. It demonstrates the ability to rise above personal injury. Finally, Bacon distinguishes between public and private revenge. Public revenge may sometimes serve a political or social purpose, such as punishing a criminal for the greater good. Private revenge, however, is driven by personal anger and disrupts social order. By making this distinction, Bacon shows that not all acts of retaliation are the same, but personal revenge is morally and socially harmful. Through this structured argument, Bacon moves from accepting revenge as natural to proving that forgiveness is the wiser and nobler choice. In this slide, we focus on two important aspects of Bacon's argument: the contrast between revenge and law, and the psychological effect of revenge. First, revenge versus law. Bacon explains that law exists to remove the need for personal revenge. In a civilized society, justice is delivered through legal systems, not through individual retaliation. When a person takes revenge into his own hands, he challenges the authority of law. Personal revenge weakens social order because it replaces organized justice with private anger. Therefore, law is meant to control and eliminate the impulse for revenge. Second, the effect of revenge. Bacon points out that revenge disturbs the mind. A person who plans revenge continues to think about the injury and remains emotionally unsettled. Instead of healing, he keeps his anger alive. Revenge does not bring peace. It prolongs suffering. He further explains this idea in the famous line, "In taking revenge, a man is but even with his enemy, but in passing it over, he is superior." When a person takes revenge, he becomes equal to the offender because he responds with the same spirit of harm. However, when he forgives and overlooks the injury, he rises morally above his enemy. Forgiveness shows strength, control, and dignity. Thus, Bacon concludes that while revenge may appear satisfying, it disturbs the mind and lowers moral standing, whereas law and forgiveness uphold order and superiority. In this slide, we understand Bacon's distinction between public revenge and private revenge. Public revenge. Public revenge refers to acts done against authority or the state, often in the form of political rebellion. It is not merely personal anger but a response directed toward rulers or governing systems. Such revenge may arise from perceived injustice in leadership or governance. It has wider social and political consequences because it affects the entire community. Private revenge. Private revenge refers to personal retaliation. It arises from individual injury, insult, or wrongdoing. This type of revenge is driven by personal anger and emotion. It disturbs social harmony because individuals take justice into their own hands instead of relying on the legal system. Through this distinction, Bacon shows that while both forms involve retaliation, private revenge is purely emotional and morally inferior, whereas public revenge carries broader political implications. In this slide, we examine the philosophical and religious influences behind Bacon's ideas in the essay. Though Bacon does not directly quote religious texts or classical philosophers in detail, his arguments clearly reflect certain traditions. First, the Christian doctrine of forgiveness. Bacon's emphasis on forgiveness over revenge closely echoes Christian teachings. Christianity promotes the idea of forgiving one's enemies and leaving judgment to God or lawful authority. The moral superiority of forgiveness, which Bacon highlights, reflects this religious belief that mercy and patience are signs of spiritual strength. His argument that forgiving makes a person superior aligns with the Christian ideal of overcoming evil with good. Second, Stoic philosophy and control of passions. Bacon's views also show the influence of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that human beings should control their emotions and act according to reason. Anger and revenge were seen as destructive passions that disturb inner peace. Bacon's warning that revenge keeps the mind disturbed clearly reflects this Stoic idea. By advocating self-control and rational judgment, he supports the Stoic principle that wisdom lies in mastering one's emotions. Thus, in Of Revenge, Bacon combines Christian moral teaching and classical Stoic philosophy to argue that forgiveness and self-control are superior to emotional retaliation. In this slide, we understand Bacon's final moral position in the essay. After analyzing the nature and effects of revenge, he clearly presents his ethical judgment. First, wise men forgive. According to Bacon, true wisdom lies in self-control and rational thinking. A wise person does not allow anger to dominate his actions. Instead of reacting impulsively, he chooses patience and forgiveness. Forgiveness reflects maturity and understanding. Second, revenge is emotional weakness. Although revenge may appear strong or bold, it is actually driven by uncontrolled emotion. It arises from anger and hurt rather than reason. A person who seeks revenge is unable to rise above his passions. In this sense, revenge reveals weakness rather than strength. Third, forgiveness shows strength. Forgiveness requires inner power. It demands control over anger and the ability to overcome personal injury. By forgiving, a person demonstrates moral superiority and dignity. He proves that he is guided by reason and character, not by impulse. Thus, Bacon's moral stand is clear. Wisdom chooses forgiveness, while revenge. In this slide, we examine the key literary features that shape the style and impact of the essay. First, aphoristic statements. Bacon uses short, powerful, and memorable sentences that express general truths. Lines such as, "Revenge is a kind of wild justice," and, "In taking revenge, a man is but even with his enemy," are compact yet deeply meaningful. These aphorisms make the essay easy to quote and highly effective in examinations. Second, biblical tone. The essay carries a serious and moral tone that resembles biblical teaching. Bacon's emphasis on forgiveness, moral superiority, and restraint reflects the language and spirit of religious instruction. The tone is authoritative and instructive, guiding readers toward ethical behavior. Third, moral philosophy. The essay is rooted in moral philosophy. Bacon does not simply describe revenge, he evaluates it from an ethical perspective. He discusses right and wrong, justice and injustice, and the higher value of forgiveness. His approach is analytical and judgmental rather than emotional. Fourth, psychological insight. Bacon shows deep understanding of human emotions. He explains how revenge keeps wounds fresh and disturbs the mind. His analysis of anger, resentment, and the desire for retaliation reveals keen psychological observation. He understands both the emotional impulse and its consequences. Through these features, the essay becomes concise, thoughtful, morally serious, and psychologically penetrating. In this slide, we analyze two significant quotations that summarize Bacon's ideas in the essay. Revenge is a kind of wild justice. This opening line presents Bacon's central argument. By calling revenge wild justice, he suggests that although revenge seeks to punish wrongdoing, it is uncontrolled and outside the boundaries of law. It is driven by emotion rather than reason. The word wild implies something primitive and untamed. Thus, revenge may resemble justice, but it lacks the discipline and fairness of lawful judgment. A man that studieth revenge keeps his own wounds green. In this line, Bacon explains the psychological effect of revenge. The phrase, "keeps his own wounds green," is a metaphor. A green wound is one that has not healed. When a person constantly thinks about revenge, he prevents emotional healing. He continues to relive the injury and prolong his own suffering. Instead of finding peace, he keeps his anger alive. Both quotations reflect Bacon's aphoristic style, moral seriousness, and psychological insight. They clearly convey his belief that revenge harms the mind and that true wisdom lies in over. In this slide, we explore some deeper and less commonly discussed aspects of the essay that are important for higher-level examinations. First, the essay reflects Renaissance humanism. Renaissance humanism emphasized human reason, moral responsibility, and practical wisdom. In Of Revenge, Bacon focuses on human behavior, ethical choice, and rational control over emotion. Instead of relying purely on religious doctrine, he analyzes revenge from a human-centered and practical perspective. This reflects the Renaissance belief in the power of reason and individual judgment. Second, the essay reflects Bacon's political experience. Bacon was not only a philosopher but also a statesman who held high political offices. His understanding of power, authority, and law is visible in the essay. When he discusses the difference between public and private revenge, he speaks with the insight of someone familiar with governance and legal systems. His practical tone comes from real political experience. Third, the essay is linked to Machiavellian political thought. Bacon's realistic approach to power and human nature shows some connection with the ideas of Machiavelli. Like Machiavelli, he observes human behavior without idealism. However, unlike Machiavelli's sometimes harsh political realism, Bacon ultimately supports moral restraint and forgiveness. This combination of realism and morality gives depth to his analysis. Finally, there is an element of irony in Bacon's life. Although he wrote moral and philosophical essays advising wisdom and integrity, Bacon himself was accused of corruption during his political career. This creates a historical irony. A writer who preached high moral standards faced moral criticism in his own life. This contrast often becomes a discussion point in advanced examinations. These facts provide a broader intellectual and historical context for understanding the depth and complexity of Bacon's essay. In this slide, we compare the philosophical ideas presented in Of Studies and Of Revenge. Though the topics are different, both essays reflect Bacon's broader vision of disciplined and balanced living. Of Studies focuses on intellectual discipline. It teaches how to train and sharpen the mind through proper reading, discussion, and writing. Bacon emphasizes the control of the mind by guiding it toward knowledge, judgment, and practical understanding. The aim is practical wisdom, the ability to think clearly and act effectively in personal and professional life. Of Revenge focuses on moral discipline. It teaches the importance of controlling anger and resisting the impulse for retaliation. Here, Bacon emphasizes the control of emotions. Instead of acting on passion, a person should act with reason and self-restraint. The goal is ethical superiority, rising above injury through forgiveness and moral strength. Thus, in Of Studies, Bacon trains the intellect, and in Of Revenge, he disciplines the emotions. Together, both essays promote a balanced personality guided by wisdom and self-control. In this slide, we compare the two essays to understand how they differ in theme, tone, focus, and style. Theme. The central theme of Studies is education. It discusses the value, uses, and proper application of knowledge. In contrast, the theme of Revenge is morality. It examines the nature of revenge and argues for forgiveness as a higher moral choice. Tone. The tone of Studies is instructional. Bacon gives direct advice on how to read, think, and apply knowledge in life. The tone of Revenge, however, is more philosophical. It reflects deeply on human emotions, justice, and moral superiority. Focus. Of Studies focuses on intellectual growth. It explains how studies shape wisdom, judgment, and practical ability. Of Revenge focuses on emotional control. It teaches how to manage anger and overcome the desire for retaliation. Style. The style of Studies is mainly enumerative. Bacon lists points clearly, such as the uses of studies and subject-wise benefits. The style of Revenge is more reflective. It analyzes the emotional and moral aspects of revenge in a thoughtful manner. Through this comparison, we see that while one essay trains the mind, the other disciplines the heart. Together, they present Bacon's vision of a balanced and wise individual. In this final revision slide, we summarize the most important facts and ideas for quick recall before examinations. Francis Bacon is known as the father of the English essay because he gave the essay a formal, concise, and practical structure. The final edition of his essays was published in 1625 and contained 58 essays. This is a frequently asked factual detail. Bacon is associated with the inductive method, which emphasizes observation, experimentation, and drawing conclusions from specific examples. In Of Revenge, the phrase wild justice refers to revenge, suggesting that it is a primitive and uncontrolled form of justice. In Of Studies, Bacon uses the metaphor of tasting, swallowing, and digesting to explain different methods of reading. The statement, "Reading maketh a full man," highlights the idea that reading enriches and completes the mind. The idea that forgiveness makes a person superior reflects Bacon's moral conclusion in Of Revenge. These key points help in quick revision and cover the most frequently asked concepts related to Bacon and his essays. Finally, let us conclude. Francis Bacon teaches us how to think wisely and live wisely. If you understand his key ideas from Of Studies and of Revenge, you can easily score marks in UG TRB exams. Revise the important facts regularly and focus on clarity. If this video helped your UG TRB preparation, like, share, and subscribe for more simple and clear explanations. Now answer this question in the comment section. Why does Bacon call revenge wild justice? A. Because it is legal punishment. B. Because it is natural but uncontrolled. C. Because it is always fair. D. Because it is encouraged by law. Comment your answer below.